Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Craig Curtis, City Manager, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and act as your Master of Ceremonies for the official opening of Veterans Park and the rededication of the Cenotaph. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of dignitaries and the Vice-Regal Party, and remain standing for the Vice-Regal salute and O Canada. Please be seated. Sorry. And now for the Vice-Regal salute. And remain standing. Please be seated. Please be seated. I would now like to acknowledge Piper Frank Nealons and the bugler for the Vice-Regal salute, Thomas Golsick. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Vice-Regal Party. His Honour, Colonel Retired the Honourable Donald S. Ethel, Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, and Her Honour, Linda Ethel. Mayor Morris Flewelling and Mrs. Hazel Flewelling. Bobby McCoy, Vice President of Alberta, Northwest Territories Command of the Royal Canadian Legion. Colonel Retired Andrew Moffat, Korea Veterans Branch, number 67. Honorary Lieutenant Colonel Ron Woodward. And led in by Aide-de-Camp Inspector Karen Simon of the RCMP. We also have a number of dignitaries with us today who've supported the project in a number of ways. The Honourable Marianne Jablonski, Minister of Seniors and Community Supports. Cal Dallas, Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Finance and Enterprise and our MLA for Red Deer South. And our City Council, in appropriate alphabetical order, Councillor Buck Buchanan, Councillor Paul Harris, Councillor Lynn Mulder, Councillor Chris Steffen, Councillor Diane Wanches, Councillor Taravia, and Councillor Frank Wong. We also have with us Inspector Ray Noble for the RCMP Red Deer Detachment. Comrade Owen Lowe, President of the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch Number 35. Lieutenant General Retired Donald Laubman, Career Veterans Branch Number 67. Colonel Retired Douglas Lindsay, Career Veterans Branch Number 67. Comrade Don Holloway, President, Career Veterans Branch Number 67. Master Warrant Officer Bob Prospero, 749 Signal Squadron. And Sergeant James Wazinski, 749 Signal Squadron. We also have with us some of the individuals and staff who are supporting today's event. Reverend Drew Burnand, Colleen Jensen, our former Director of Community Services, Greg Scott, our Acting Director of Community Services, Christina Oberg, Acting Recreation Parks and Culture Manager, Jerry Headland, Project Superintendent, and Curtis Martinek, Project Specialist. I would now like to invite Pipe Major Frank Nealons to come forward and play Amazing Grace.
For every person who is about to go into action, there are two very personal thoughts. The first is, how will I stand up to the enemy, and will I let my comrades down? The second thought is a little more subtle and personal. If I don't come through, will I be remembered? And who will remember me? Those of us standing here today know perfectly well how these people did under fire, for we are truly blessed in our daily lives with the results of their actions and their bravery. For as the years pass, the matter of who will remember becomes increasingly questionable, but increasingly important. In those immediate years after a war, the next of kin, the family, the friends, and the comrades remember well. And they remember every day because there are reminders every day. But with each passing year, now with each passing day, there are fewer and fewer of those friends, relatives, and comrades to remember. Almost 100 years ago, after the Great War, the famous poet and author Rudyard Kipling wrote these words while he was in Canada. From little towns in a far land we came, to save our honor and a world aflame. By little towns in a far land we sleep, and trust those things we won to you to keep. And now it's you and you and you, all of you, every single one of you, who must take on this responsibility of remembering. Not just today, not just for those 2 minutes on the 11th of November that ease your soul and conscience, but every day. Every time you look at this cenotaph, and every time you walk or drive past the Veterans Park, hear the voices calling out, "Remember me, remember me."
Members of the Canadian Forces, and distinguished guests all. It's truly an honor for me to be here this morning representing the 749 Signal Squadron Reserve Unit here in Red Deer. The military, as we know, has had a very long history in central Alberta and in Red Deer, as is evidenced by this beautiful cenotaph. But it's not just about history. The forces are active and involved in our community today. Members of our 2 reserve units and other citizens from central Alberta who've joined the forces full-time serve in our community and abroad, in places like Afghanistan, at the Olympics, in disaster areas that come along across the country. And they're also involved in our community every day as ordinary citizens, serving the folks who live in central Alberta. Last week we were honored and blessed to have the Portraits of Honor here in Red Deer. What a moving experience that was for those people in our community who've never experienced war, never experienced the loss of a loved one. It truly was an event that our community supported very well and that we were all proud to be part of. General Moffat made the comment about remembering. Last week at Portraits of Honor, General Rick Hillier said that one of the 3 questions that every parent asked when they met those coffins at Trenton was, will they remember? Will they remember? On behalf of all of us who are involved with the military and all of us who live and work in this wonderful community of Central Alberta, yes, we will remember. Congratulations to everyone who's been involved in this event. Thank you very much.
For your attending the official opening of Veterans Park and the rededication of our cenotaph. We gather together today to celebrate the completion of a major development in our downtown and to commemorate the service and sacrifice of soldiers over 11 decades. Red Deer has a long and very distinguished history of service in times of war and with peacekeeping missions. Indeed, Red Deer and area has the distinction in each of the First and Second World Wars of having the highest voluntary enlistment per capita in all of the Dominion of Canada.
And now to jointly unveil the plaque commemorating this opening. I will now invite His Honor to come to the podium for his address.
Thank you and good morning. Your Worship, elected officials, Minister Jablonski, other MLAs, and I've lost track of how many there are here, but they're very, very important. Veterans of the Korea War, veterans of the World War II, soldiers, veterans, legionnaires, and vets, and of course, members of the KVA Association. Her Honor, my wife Linda and I have made a number of visits to the wonderful city of Red Deer since we began our viceregal duties early last year. One of the things we always appreciate about this community is your commitment to honoring those who have served, as you've heard from the previous speakers, and particularly the fallen heroes who sacrificed everything in the name of crown and country. For example, we were here last November for the Remembrance Day service at Lindsay Thurber High School, and we were truly touched by the obvious dedication and commitment the annual ceremony receives from the community. This new Veterans Park will be yet another way for the people of Red Deer to remember the men and women in uniform who have offered so much to our province and nation. And the cenotaph being rededicated today will serve as an important place for people to honor the fallen. Just as an aside, this is in a beautiful location. I know for those of you in Calgary that have been to the Peacekeepers Park, it's a nice little park where you can stop and meditate and think about those that have fallen, all of those that have fallen either in Second World War, Korea, or on peace support operations. You can do the same thing here. You can give thanks for their vital contributions and to reflect on the central Canadian principles of freedom, peace, and democracy that they died defending. The American writer Albert Pine had an effective way of describing what this park and cenotaph will achieve. He said, quote, "What we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others and the world remains and is immortal," unquote. Your efforts in creating this beautiful peace will ensure that the memory of our fallen heroes remains and lives in the hearts and minds of Albertans for generations to come. As Her Majesty the Queen's representative in Alberta, it's my pleasure, indeed an honor, to congratulate everyone who played a role in the development of Veterans Park. I'd also like to thank you for your dedication to your community and to the men and women of the Canadian Forces. Finally, to families of the fallen who may be here this morning, I hope that I can find page 5. That this park and cenotaph brings you comfort and wish you peace. Just before I end, you know, Red Deer is occupies a special place in many soldiers. I joined the Army a million years ago in Calgary and served with the battalions there, as did many others. And every year, the Army Command moved the Army out of Calgary. They didn't want a bunch of soldiers there during Stampede because we'd enjoy ourselves too much. So we had to go to that place called Wainwright. And I'm sure there's a lot of old soldiers here who recognize Wainwright. I say that with a lot of respect, having spent many summers and winters up there. But in the old days, in the mid-50s, when you drove from Calgary in convoy, sometimes as a brigade-level convoy, sometimes usually as a battalion-level convoy, of packets of 5 or 6 vehicles and so forth, transport officers and commanding officers and generals hiding around the corner to make sure that the co-driver didn't go to sleep. As you were coming up the highway, there was no such thing as Highway 2, the Queen Elizabeth Highway, because you came through downtown Red Deer. And I'll tell you, when you came through Red Deer and you're in the truck, winter or summer, you knew you were about halfway to Wainwright. The disappointing thing is you never stopped in Red Deer. They always had the fuel points after Red Deer. And those that got out going through town were in a lot of trouble. Notwithstanding that, it occupies a special place in many soldiers' heart of Red Deer. So thank you. That has absolutely nothing to do with the dedication today, but I thought I'd tell you that war story. Anyhow, thank you very much. God bless. God save the Queen, and enjoy the park. Thank you. Thank you. Down?
Thank you, Your Honor. With the park officially open, it is my pleasure to invite the Reverend Drew Burnand to come to the podium again for the prayer of benediction.
Your Honors, Dr. and Mrs. Ethel, Your Worship, most distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, shall we pray, please? O God of all creation and of all people, we find ourselves at a crossroads, for our minds wander back to days of old, when conflict had to be addressed. Yet we are people who look to the future, people who work for peace in all things. As we rededicate the cenotaph, remembering wars gone by, our prayer is that not many more names will be inscribed as time goes on. God of peace, we ask that you will remind us always that peace will prevail despite the sacrifice. We pray for this great country of ours. We pray for its governments at every level. We pray for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. We pray for her representative here in Alberta. For all people who make decisions for others, we ask for your guidance, your wisdom, and the greater good. This we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Burnand. The last post will now be played by Thomas Golzick, followed by 2 minutes of silence, after which Pipe Major Frank Nealons will play the lament, followed by Reveille.
shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Thank you, Brigadier Policotti. We will now proceed with the placing of the wreaths, commencing with His Honour Colonel Retired the Honourable Donald S. Ethel, followed by Mayor Flewelling on behalf of the City of Red Deer, and then the other wreaths.